The marble floor of the Hartwell Court antechamber was cold enough to leach the warmth straight through the thin soles of Marisol Vance's slippers, and she suspected that was deliberate. The Lord Chamberlain had a reputation for keeping petitioners waiting in rooms designed to remind them of their own insignificance. The ceiling soared 3 stories above her head. The walls were paneled in dark oak, so polished it seemed to drink the candlelight rather than reflect it. And the gilded double doors at the far end stood closed, as they had for the better part of an hour, with 2 royal guards flanking them like statues that had forgotten how to breathe. She pressed her gloved hands together in her lap and refused, absolutely refused, to look at the man seated across from her. Lord Caspian Ashbourne, Duke of Renmore, had arrived 20 minutes after she had, swept past her without so much as a glance, and taken the seat directly opposite hers. He had not greeted her. He had not acknowledged that they had been introduced, by her uncle no less, on 3 separate occasions over the past 4 years. He had simply withdrawn a folded letter from inside his coat, broken its seal with a flick of his thumb, and begun to read. He was reading still. Marisol counted the candles in the chandelier above them. 48. She counted them twice, just to be certain. She counted the panels in the wall behind his head, the stitches on the embroidered cushion beside her, the number of breaths she took between the distant tolling of the hall clock. Anything not to look at the man whose presence had somehow made the already cold room colder. "You are staring at the wall behind me, Miss Vance," he said, without lifting his eyes from the letter. "If there is something on it that requires your attention, by all means." Her jaw tightened. "I am admiring the woodwork, Your Grace." "How fortunate for the woodwork," she inhaled slowly. "I did not realize you had noticed I was here at all." "I noticed." He turned a page. "I simply saw no reason to disturb whatever rehearsed grievance you were preparing to deliver." "I wasn't preparing a grievance." "Then you ought to. The Lord Chamberlain rarely rewards petitioners who arrive without one." The casual cruelty of it landed exactly as he had meant it to. Marisol felt her cheeks heat and forced herself to meet his eyes for the first time. They were not what she remembered. She had remembered them as gray. They were closer to slate, the color of a sea before a storm, fringed by lashes too dark for a man with hair that pale. He looked older than the last time she had seen him, though she could not place where the change lay. Perhaps the line at the corner of his mouth, the one that had not been there at the spring assembly 2 years ago. Perhaps the faint hollow beneath his cheekbone, suggesting he had not slept enough lately, or perhaps had not slept properly in months. She did not care. She refused to care. "I came here at the Lord Chamberlain's request," she said evenly. "Not my own." "As did I." He folded the letter and tucked it back inside his coat. "Which suggests, Miss Vance, that whatever business is to be conducted today involves us both. A circumstance I find I am every bit as displeased by as you appear to be." "Then we have something in common at last." His mouth moved, the faintest twitch, not a smile, but something that lived in the same neighborhood. "Do not flatter yourself." She had known Caspian Ashbourne for 4 years. 4 years since the night her uncle Lord Estienne had introduced them at the Briarholt salon, and Caspian had bowed over her hand for precisely the length of time courtesy required, and not 1 heartbeat longer. She had been 20 then. He had been 28, already burdened with the dukedom after his father's sudden death the previous winter, already carrying himself as if he had been born wearing the title rather than inheriting it. She had thought him the most insufferable man she had ever met. Time had done nothing to revise the assessment. He had spoken to her exactly 4 times in those 4 years. Once to inform her that the book she was reading at a country house weekend was a translation, not the original, and a poor translation at that. Once to remark, when she had laughed at something her cousin said over dinner, that the Vance women did seem to enjoy their own company a great deal. once to suggest that her opinion on the proposed reform of the inheritance laws was charming in its naivete, and once, only once, to thank her for passing him the salt. She had hated him after the first encounter. She had refined that hatred to a fine point by the third. And now they were sitting in a freezing antechamber in the heart of the royal court, summoned for reasons no one had bothered to explain to her, while he treated her with the same chill indifference he treated the woodwork. The doors at the far end of the chamber groaned open. A liveried steward emerged, bowed in their general direction, and addressed neither of them by name. "His lordship is detained on a matter of state. He bids you both wait. Refreshments shall be brought." The doors closed again before Marisol could ask how long detained meant. "Marvelous," she muttered. Caspian withdrew the letter from his coat once more. "If you intend to spend the next hour seething visibly, Miss Vance, I would ask only that you do so in silence. I am attempting to read. You have read that letter twice already. Then I shall read it a third time and learn something new. Or perhaps," she said, and she heard her own voice sharpen and could not stop it, "you might attempt the novel experience of conversation, since we are to be confined here together for what appears to be some considerable while." He looked up at last, truly looked. For the first time in 4 years, he held her gaze long enough that she felt the hairs at the nape of her neck. "Miss Vance," he said, "I do not converse to fill silence. I converse when I have something to say. At present, I do not. How splendid for the rest of us. Indeed." She turned her face deliberately toward the long window at the far end of the chamber, where the early evening light was bleeding away into a wash of bruised violet against the courtyard stones. Snow had begun to drift down in slow, soft flakes, the first of the season. She watched it land on the iron grating outside the glass and tried to slow the angry thudding of her pulse. She had not wanted to come to court. Her uncle had insisted. The summons had arrived on cream paper sealed with the chamberlain's wax, and her Uncle Estienne had read it twice, frowned, and told her she was to attend without hesitation, without excuse, and without him, because he had already departed for the northern estates and could not turn back. She had asked what the summons concerned. He had said he did not know. She had asked whether she ought to be afraid. He had not answered. She was afraid. The footsteps in the corridor outside grew louder. Marisol turned her head sharply. The doors did not open this time. Instead, a panel set into the side wall, one she had not even noticed, swung inward, and a small, wiry man in the dark green livery of the chamberlain's household stepped through with a tray bearing 2 cups of something that steamed. "His lordship sends his apologies for the delay," the man said, setting the tray on the low table between them, "and requests that you remain. Matters have grown more complicated. He shall send for you when he is able." "Complicated how?" Marisol asked. The man's eyes flickered, just briefly, toward Caspian, and then away. "I am not at liberty to say, miss." He withdrew. The panel closed behind him with the soft click of a hidden latch. Marisol stared at the steaming cups, then at the closed panel. Then, because she could not help herself, at Caspian. He was watching her now. The letter was nowhere in sight. His expression had shifted into something careful, alert, the look of a man who had heard something she had missed. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing. You looked at me as if I had grown a second head. I looked at you because the steward did. He was waiting to see whether you understood." "Understood what?" Caspian leaned back against the carved oak of his chair, and for a long moment he did not answer. The candlelight caught the angle of his jaw, the faint, pale scar along his throat she had never noticed before. the way his fingers drummed once against the arm of the chair and then stilled. "Miss Vance," he said at last, very quietly, "I do not believe we are here to petition the Chamberlain. I believe we are here because he wishes to question us, together, about something neither of us has yet been told." The cold of the marble floor seemed suddenly to rise straight up through her bones. Question us about what? He did not answer. He did not need to. Somewhere in the depths of the court, far down the corridor beyond the gilded doors, a bell began to toll, slow and deep and deliberate, and Marisol heard her own breath catch in her throat as the doors at the far end of the chamber swung wide. A figure stood framed in the doorway. It was not the Lord Chamberlain. The figure in the doorway was a woman, and Marisol knew her by reputation alone, which was to say, she knew enough to be afraid. Lady Coraline Whitbourne was the Chamberlain's senior attendant, a thin, sharp-featured woman in her middle 40s, with iron-colored hair drawn back so severely it seemed to pull her brows upward into permanent suspicion. She wore the dark green of the household, but her sash was the deep crimson reserved for those who carried the Chamberlain's authority in his absence. She had served 3 monarchs in succession, and it was said she had buried as many of her own enemies in the long, quiet way that court enemies were buried, with reputation rather than blade. She crossed the antechamber without haste. She did not bow. She did not greet either of them. She stopped 2 paces from the table where the steaming cups sat untouched, and she looked first at Marisol, and then, more slowly, at Caspian. "Your Grace," she said. "Miss Vance, the Chamberlain regrets that he is unable to receive you this evening. The matter for which you were summoned has, in the past hour, grown to require the involvement of His Majesty himself. Accordingly, the audience is postponed." Marisol felt a thread of relief. She moved to rise. "Sit, Miss Vance," said Lady Whitbourne, without looking at her. "I have not finished." Marisol sat. "You will both remain at court tonight," Lady Whitbourne continued. "Quarters have been arranged. You shall be summoned at first light. Until then, you are not to leave the East Wing. You are not to send messages. You are not to receive visitors. You are not, under any circumstances, to discuss the matter of your summons with one another, or with any other soul within these walls. Is that understood?" "With respect, my lady," Caspian said, and his voice was perfectly level. "We have not been told what the matter of our summons is." "I am aware, Your Grace. That is the point." Marisol's hands clenched in her lap. "Lady Whitbourne, I cannot remain at court overnight. My uncle is away. There is no one to chaperone me. My household is expecting my return before nightfall. Your household has been informed that you are detained on royal business. Your uncle has been written to. As for chaperonage..." She paused, and her eyes moved between them with the cool, deliberate weight of a woman placing chess pieces. "His Grace, the Duke of Renmore, will serve. Your quarters adjoin his. The doors between them shall be locked. The corridor shall be watched. Your reputation, Miss Vance, will be no more endangered tonight than it was when you walked through these doors this afternoon." The words were spoken so smoothly, so reasonably, that it took Marisol a moment to register the impossibility of them. Adjoining quarters, her voice came out thinner than she intended. "Lady Whitbourne, I cannot. You can, and you will. There must be other arrangements. There are not. There must be. The East Wing alone has 30 rooms. Surely one of them lies at some distance from His Grace's. Miss Vance." Lady Whitbourne folded her hands at her waist. "The East Wing is full. The court has gathered for the winter session. Every chamber of suitable rank is occupied. The 2 rooms set aside for tonight's audience are the only quarters available, and they were never intended to house separate parties. They were intended to house witnesses to a matter of state, kept within a single secured corridor, where they might be observed and protected. Both functions are best served by the arrangement I have described. Witnesses. Caspian's voice had gone very quiet. Lady Whitbourne, we are witnesses now? You are what His Majesty determines you to be, Your Grace, and at this hour the determination has not yet been made. Until it has, you are guests of the household, with all the courtesy that implies, and all the constraint. She paused, and for the first time, something almost human entered her eyes, though it was not warmth, it was warning. I shall be plain. There are factions at court tonight that would benefit greatly from learning what the two of you know. There are others who would benefit from learning what you do not. Until His Majesty's audience tomorrow, your safest course, Miss Vance, is to remain within sight of His Grace, and His is to remain within sight of you. Do not mistake the inconvenience of the arrangement for an indignity. It is a precaution, and it is not negotiable. Marisol opened her mouth and closed it again. She tried to summon a refusal that did not sound like the voice of a woman whose bones had gone hollow. She found none. And if I leave, she said, if I simply walk out through those doors and return to my uncle's house, you will be stopped at the gate. Lady Whitbourne's voice did not change. Politely, by men who answer to me, and brought back. I would prefer that you spare them, and yourself, the embarrassment. Caspian rose. The motion was unhurried. He did not look at Marisol. He addressed Lady Whitbourne with the same level courtesy he might have offered a tradesman who had erred in the accounts. My lady, a word, if you will permit it. Privately. You may speak before Miss Vance. The arrangement concerns her as much as you. Then I shall speak plainly. His jaw was tight. If Miss Vance is to be confined to a room adjoining mine through the night, the discretion of the household is the only thing that protects her name. You may answer for your own people. You cannot answer for the rest of the court. By morning, there will be talk. There will not. You cannot guarantee that. I can, Your Grace, because I have already arranged it. Lady Whitbourne's mouth thinned into something that might, in a different woman, have been a smile. As far as the court knows, and shall continue to know, Miss Vance arrived this evening as the betrothed of the Duke of Renmore. Your engagement is of recent and quiet conclusion, not yet announced through the customary channels, but witnessed by the Chamberlain's office 2 months past, and held in confidence at the family's request. Tonight, you are housed together because you are to be married. Tomorrow, depending on what His Majesty determines, you may continue to be so, or the engagement may be quietly dissolved and forgotten, as such arrangements occasionally are. Either way, Miss Vance's name is protected, as is yours. The silence that followed was the silence of a room in which the air itself had stopped moving. Betrothed! Marisol's voice was barely audible. For tonight, said Lady Whitbourne, and if necessary, tomorrow. No longer than that, unless the two of you decide otherwise, which I expect you shall not. You cannot simply declare us engaged. I have not. The Chamberlain has. The papers are filed. The household believes it. The court will believe it, because the household does. By dawn, Miss Vance, half the East Wing shall be inquiring with great interest after the date of the wedding. I would advise you to prepare an answer that does not contradict your betrothed's. She turned toward the door without waiting for either of them to reply. A maid will collect you in a quarter of an hour to escort you to your rooms. I would suggest, in the meantime, that you use the time to align your account of how you came to be engaged. You shall be asked. Repeatedly. Beginning tonight. The panel through which the steward had come earlier opened once more. Lady Whitbourne stepped through. The latch clicked behind her. Marisol did not move. She could not. Her hands were trembling so finely, she pressed them flat against her skirts to make them stop. The candles flickered. The cups of forgotten tea sent their steam in slow ribbons toward the high-painted ceiling, where someone long dead had imagined cherubs blowing trumpets at a sun that no longer rose for any of them. Caspian had not sat down. He stood with one hand braced against the back of his chair, his head bent, the line of his shoulders so still she could not tell if he was breathing. "This is monstrous," she said. "It is irregular." "It is monstrous, Your Grace." "It is also done." He lifted his head at last. His eyes had darkened to the color of slate before rain. "Miss Vance, I must ask you a question, and I require an honest answer, because everything that follows depends upon it. Have you been told anything, by anyone in the past month, that might explain why we are here?" "No. Nothing. No letter, no visitor, no remark from your uncle that struck you as strange?" "Nothing." She drew in a breath. "And you?" He was silent for a long moment. "A letter," he said. 2 weeks ago. Unsigned. It said only that I should be careful what I had written, and to whom, because the contents had not stayed where I sent them." "What did you write?" "To whom? That, Miss Vance, is precisely what I do not yet know." A tap at the antechamber door. The maid had come. Caspian extended his arm to her, formally, the courtesy of a man escorting his betrothed. "We have a quarter of an hour to learn how to lie to half the court," he said, very softly, so the maid could not hear. "I suggest we begin." The East Wing corridor was lit by oil sconces, set at intervals of perhaps 20 paces, their flames steady behind glass cylinders that had been polished to a transparency Marisol's own household could not have managed. 2 guards stood at the corridor's mouth, where it joined the main hall, and 2 more at the far end, where a narrow staircase wound up toward what she presumed were the servants' floors. The maid walked ahead of them with a candle she did not need, since the corridor was already brighter than most ballrooms Marisol had attended. She walked, Marisol realized, to give them privacy without appearing to. Caspian's arm beneath her gloved hand was steady. He had not spoken since they left the antechamber. The silence between them had a different quality now than it had before. It was no longer the silence of 2 strangers who despised each other. It was the silence of 2 people who had been pushed onto the same narrow plank above the same dark water and were trying to walk it without looking down. The maid stopped before a tall white door inlaid with a pattern of leaves in pale gold leaf. "Your chamber, miss," she said with a curtsy. "His Grace's lies through the connecting door within. The corridor key shall be turned at the 11th bell and reopened at 6. Should you require anything, the bell pull beside the bed shall summon me. I am Wren. I shall sleep in the chamber across the hall and shall hear if you call." "Thank you, Wren," Marisol said, and was surprised to find her voice was steady. The maid bowed and withdrew. Her footsteps faded down the corridor toward whatever quarter of the court she had been summoned from. Caspian opened the door. The chamber within was perhaps twice the size of Marisol's own bedroom at her uncle's house, and at least 3 times as cold. A fire had been laid in the broad marble hearth, but had only just been lit. The bed was canopied in heavy blue silk, large enough for 4. The connecting door to the adjoining chamber stood at the far wall, its handle of polished brass, and Marisol felt her eyes catch upon it, and had to drag them away by force. "You will be more comfortable nearer the fire," Caspian said. "I shall send for additional wood. Do not trouble yourself. It is not trouble, Miss Vance. It is January, and the room is cold." He moved to the bell pull beside the hearth and rang it once. He did not look at her as he did. He removed his greatcoat and laid it across the back of a chair. Beneath it, he wore the black coat and dove-gray waistcoat of the court. Mourning he had not, she now realized, ever fully set aside, though his father had been dead 5 years. A second maid appeared. He spoke to her quietly. She nodded and withdrew. "Wood, and a hot brick for the bed," he said to Marisol when she was gone. "And another lamp. The light here is insufficient. You did not need to." "I know." She crossed to the hearth. She stood as close to it as she dared, without scorching her skirts, and held her hands out to the meager flame. Behind her, she heard him move to the long, narrow window, draw back the heavy curtain, and stand looking out at whatever lay beyond. The snow that had begun in the antechamber had thickened. She could hear the soft, dry whisper of it against the leaded glass. "How long?" she said, without turning. "Have you known we would be summoned?" 2 weeks, as I said. The letter. And you did not warn me. Miss Vance. I had no reason to believe you were involved. The letter named no one but myself. I assumed until this evening that whatever was coming for me alone. And now I have been forced to revise my assumption." She turned. He was still at the window, his back to her, and the line of his shoulders too straight to be relaxed. "Your Grace, I have spent 4 years in your company, off and on, at gatherings of my uncle's household and yours. In all that time, you have given me no reason to imagine you would lift a finger on my behalf in any matter, however small. Tonight you have done so twice already. I find I don't understand why." He was silent. "Is it because you fear what I might say to the chamberlain tomorrow?" "No." "Is it because you owe my uncle something?" "No." "Then why?" He turned at last. His face in the firelight was harder than she remembered, and at the same time, somehow, younger. As if something inside him had been stripped of one of its layers in the past hour without his permission. "Because, Miss Vance," he said, "when Lady Whitbourne told you that you were to be confined to a room adjoining mine, you went pale, and your hand shook in your lap, and you did not allow either thing to show in your voice. I have seen men twice your age in chambers, half as cold, lose their composure entirely under less. Whatever I have thought of you over 4 years, I have not thought you a coward, and I do not think it now. You did not deserve what was just done to you. The least I can do is see that the rest of the night does not deepen the injury." The fire crackled. A log settled in the hearth with a soft, collapsing sigh. Marisol did not know what to say. She had been prepared for cruelty. She had been prepared for indifference. She had prepared, in the corridor on his arm, an entire arsenal of cool replies to whatever cold remark he might offer her once they were alone. She had not prepared for this. "That is the kindest thing you have ever said to me," she said at last. "And I do not know whether to thank you or to ask what you have done with the Duke of Renmore." His mouth moved, almost a smile. Almost. "He is, I am afraid, still here. He is merely tired." "You look tired?" "I have not slept properly in some weeks. Because of the letter. Among other reasons." She waited. He did not elaborate. A second knock at the door announced the arrival of the wood and the hot brick and the second lamp, and the maid laid the fire higher and slid the brick into the bed and lit the lamp upon the writing table and curtsied and withdrew, all without speaking. The chamber filled slowly with a light that was almost warm. When they were alone again, Caspian crossed to the connecting door. He turned the key in the lock on her side. He withdrew the key and laid it on the mantelpiece, in plain view, where she could see it from the bed. "It is locked from your side," he said. "You hold the key. I cannot pass through that door tonight unless you choose to permit it. I will not knock. I will not ask. If you require me, you have only to come to the door and call. The wall is thin. I shall hear you. Your Grace. Yes. Why are you telling me this? He looked at her for a long moment. The slate storm color of his eyes was unreadable in the lamplight. Because I have spent 4 years, he said, convincing myself that you were exactly the sort of woman I had been raised to find tedious. I am beginning to suspect I have been wrong, and I find I have very little time tonight in which to discover by how much. So I am attempting, Miss Vance, to begin honestly, with the door and the key, and the truth that whatever is coming for us tomorrow, I would prefer to face it with you on my side, rather than not. He bowed. He crossed to the connecting door, turned the handle from his side, stepped through into the adjoining chamber, and closed the door softly behind him. Marisol stood alone in the fire-lit room, the brass key gleaming on the mantelpiece, and discovered that she was no longer trembling from the cold. She was trembling from something else entirely, and she did not yet have a name for it. And then a single sharp rap sounded against the corridor door behind her. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, and a voice she did not recognize, said her name through the wood. Miss Vance. The voice through the door was male, low and unhurried, the kind of voice that had been trained to carry without ever rising. It was not Caspian's. It was not any voice she could place. She did not move at once. She looked first at the brass key gleaming on the mantel, then at the connecting door, and considered, for a single dishonorable breath, calling Caspian's name. She did not. She drew the shawl from the back of the chair across her shoulders, crossed the room, and laid her palm flat against the corridor door without opening it. Who is there? Forgive the hour. My name is Adrian Cassel. I am an attaché of the Chancellery. I have been sent with a message for you from Lady Whitbourne. At this hour. At her instruction. May I deliver it? She hesitated. The corridor was watched. 2 guards at one end, 2 at the other. He could not have come this far without their leave. And yet something in the smoothness of the voice prickled at the back of her neck, the way the antechamber had, the way Lady Whitbourne's careful sentences had. Slide it beneath the door, if you please. There was a pause. She listened. After a moment, she heard the soft scrape of paper across the polished floor. A single folded sheet appeared at her feet, sealed with green wax. I shall wait, the voice said, in case you have a reply. She knelt and lifted the paper. The seal was the Chancellery's, properly impressed. The handwriting inside, when she broke it, was not Lady Whitbourne's. She had received 2 letters from the Chamberlain's senior attendant in her life, and the hand on both had been spare and angular, all sharp downstrokes. The hand on this paper was rounder, more leisurely, the hand of a man who had the time to write beautifully and wished her to know it. Miss Vance, it read. I do not know whether you remember me. We met at the Lendrick midsummer, 3 years past. You wore a green ribbon at your wrist and laughed at something my brother said. And I have thought of you, on and off, ever since. I had not expected to see you at court tonight, and certainly not on the Duke of Renmore's arm. If the arrangement is what it appears to be, accept my warmest congratulations. If it is not, and if you find yourself in any difficulty whatsoever, I beg you to send word. The Chancellery answers to me in matters such as these. Yours in old acquaintance A.C. She read it twice. She read it a 3rd time, more slowly, because the 3rd reading was when she remembered. Adrian Cassel, the younger son of Lord Cassel of Brenneth, who had been one of her uncle's tenants before his elevation. 3 summers ago at the Lendrick Festival, she had stood beside the long table where the punch was served, and a dark-haired young man with a quick, clever mouth had made her cousin laugh until she wept. And Marisol had laughed too, once, at something he had said about the visiting ambassador's hat. He had bowed to her. He had asked her name. He had been at her elbow for perhaps a quarter of an hour, and then her cousin had been called away, and Marisol had been called after her. and she had not seen him again. She had thought in the carriage home that he had been the most charming man she had spoken to all summer. She had been 21. She had thought a great many men charming that summer. None of them had thought of her again, so far as she had ever discovered. She had eventually stopped wondering whether one of them might. She stood now in the firelight of a court chamber she should not have been in, holding a letter from a man who had remembered her ribbon for 3 years, and she felt the strangest small lurch beneath her ribs. Not pleasure exactly. Something more complicated. A small, sharp gratification. And underneath it, immediately and almost guiltily, a wariness she could not yet name. "Miss Vance?" the voice through the door asked. "Will there be a reply?" "Not tonight. Thank you, Mr. Cassell. Please convey my regards." "Of course." A small pause. "Sleep well, Miss Vance. And if you should reconsider, in the morning or at any hour, the chancellery is 2 corridors west, and the door is never barred to a friend." His footsteps moved away down the corridor. She heard him exchange a quiet word with one of the guards. She heard him laugh, low, at something the guard murmured back. The footsteps faded. She refolded the letter. Her hands were not quite steady. She stood for a long moment with it in her palm, and then she crossed to the connecting door and rapped once, lightly. The answer came almost at once. "Yes. May I open this?" "You hold the key." She turned it. The door swung inward. Caspian stood in the middle of his chamber, his coat removed and his sleeves rolled to the elbow, a sheaf of papers in one hand and a silver letter knife in the other. The chamber beyond was a near mirror of her own, somewhat darker. The bed unturned, a low writing desk drawn close to the fire and strewn with documents she could not read at this distance, and did not try to. "I'm sorry," she said. "I would not interrupt without cause." "Then there is cause." She held out the letter. He set down the knife and the papers and crossed the room and took it. He read it standing, by the light of the wall lamp beside the door. He read it once. He did not read it twice. "Adrien Cassell," he said. "You know him." "I know of him. He is the Chancellery's eyes and ears in the East Wing. He is very good at his work. He is also, by reputation, devoted to making himself useful to women who find themselves out of their depth at court." His eyes lifted to hers. "Did you find yourself out of your depth, Miss Vance?" "I have been at court for half a day." "I am drowning, Your Grace." "Then you understand why he came." "He came because he met me 3 summers ago and remembered the color of my ribbon." "He came," Caspian said, "because someone informed him within the last 2 hours that you were lodged in this corridor under my name, and he calculated, very quickly, that you might be the sort of person he could be of service to. The ribbon he has researched since." She felt something unsteady inside her chest, tip sideways. "You cannot know that. I cannot prove it to you tonight, but I have watched him work for 6 years. He does not write letters at the 11th bell to women whose situations he has not first studied." He folded the letter and held it out to her. "Keep this. Show it to no one. Do not reply. You think he means me harm. I think he means himself good, and that his good and yours are not, at present, the same direction. You do not know him. I have said what I think. You said almost the same of yourself an hour ago." Her voice was sharper than she meant. "You said I should not assume anything of you, because I had spent 4 years deciding what kind of man you were. You asked me to begin honestly. So I shall ask you to extend the same courtesy to a man I have not seen in 3 years, and whom you have decided already to mistrust on my behalf." He was silent. "I am not a child, Your Grace. I do not require protection from a polite letter." "No," he said. "You do not." His voice had gone quieter. Something behind his eyes had drawn back, the way a tide draws back, leaving something exposed on the wet sand that she did not entirely recognize. "Forgive me," he said. "I overspoke. Why did you?" "I do not know. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have at present." He turned away from her, toward the fire. The line of his back was no longer the controlled line of an hour ago. There was something in it that made her think, absurdly, of a man who had been struck and was waiting to see whether he would feel the second blow. "Your Grace, yes. I shall keep the letter. I shall not reply. I am not foolish, whatever you may believe. But I would ask you not to speak of Mr. Castle again, as if you knew, on my behalf, what he intends. I have had 4 years of being told what people intend toward me. I find I should like, while I am here, to be permitted to find out for myself." He inclined his head without turning. "As you wish, Miss Vance." She withdrew. She closed the connecting door softly. She turned the key. She set it back upon her own mantle and stood looking at it for a long time, and then at the folded letter in her hand, and could not have said, for the life of her, which one of the two she most wanted to throw into the fire. She did not sleep well. She slept at all, which surprised her, but she slept the shallow, uneven sleep of a woman whose body had given up before her mind was willing to follow. She woke twice in the small hours to the sound of the wind shifting against the leaded window, and once near dawn to the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her door, slow, measured footsteps that paused for the space of 3 breaths and then moved on. She lay rigid until they faded. She did not rise. She did not call for the maid. She watched the gray light begin to push at the edges of the curtains and thought of her uncle's house, and of the warm, small fire in her own bedroom there, and of how very far away it had become in a single afternoon. The bell tolled 6. The corridor key turned in its lock somewhere distant. Wren came at the quarter, bringing washing water and a small tray of bread and stewed pears and tea, and laid out a fresh gown that had been sent from somewhere with a note pinned to the sleeve in Lady Whitbourne's spare hand. Suitable for the morning audience. Do not refuse it. She did not refuse it. The gown was deep blue wool, simple, well cut, plainer than anything Marisol owned, and also, she suspected, considerably more expensive. Wren dressed her hair with a quick competence that suggested she had done it for women in worse states than Marisol's. Neither of them spoke much. When Marisol asked whether the audience had been confirmed for that morning, Wren only said that she had not been told and that she was not the person to ask. "Then who is?" "Lady Whitbourne, miss." "Or His Grace." "His Grace is awake?" "His Grace, miss, has not been to bed." It was past 9 when the connecting door opened from the other side. Caspian had bathed and shaved and changed. He looked like a man who had not slept. He also looked, more disconcertingly, like a man who had spent the night thinking and had reached conclusions. "The audience is delayed again," he said without preamble, "until midday at the earliest, possibly later." "What has happened?" "I do not know with certainty. The household is restless. 2 of the chancellery clerks departed at dawn under escort. There are more guards on the east wing than there were last night. Something has shifted." "Shifted how?" "Miss Vance." He hesitated, and she saw him weigh whether to tell her, and saw the moment he chose to. "I am increasingly persuaded that the matter for which we are here concerns a correspondence that was intercepted some weeks ago. Letters of a sensitive nature between persons of standing. My letter of warning, 2 weeks past, suggested that something I had written had fallen into hands it was not meant for. If that is correct, and if the Chamberlain has come into possession of the correspondence, then the question he wishes to put to us tomorrow is whether we know who passed it on. I have written nothing of any sensitivity to anyone in my life. I believe you. That is not the difficulty. The difficulty is that someone has written something that mentions you, and the Chamberlain does not yet know whether the mention is yours or about you, or merely near you. She felt cold for the first time since waking. Mentions me how? I do not know. I shall know when he tells me. A knock at the corridor door. Wren had returned, with a card on a small silver tray. "For Miss Vance, miss," she said. "The gentleman waits in the small reception, with Lady Whitbourne's permission." The card read, "Adrian Castle." Marisol felt Caspian's eyes upon her without looking. She did not look at him. She set the card down on the writing table. "Tell Mr. Castle I shall come." "Miss Vance." "Your Grace." "Do not." She turned to him at last. Her voice, when it came, was very quiet, but very level. "You said yesterday that you would prefer to face whatever came with me on your side, rather than not. I shall not be on your side, Your Grace, if I am also under your hand. I shall meet Mr. Castle because I choose to, and I shall draw my own conclusions, and you shall trust me to do so, or you shall not, and we shall both find out tomorrow what that costs us." He held her eyes for a long moment. Then he inclined his head, the smallest possible bow. "As you wish." She went. The small reception was a sitting room 2 doors down, paneled in pale wood, with tall windows that looked out upon a snow-covered courtyard and a single thin tree, black against the white. Adrien Cassel rose as she entered. He was, she saw at once, exactly as she remembered him, and not at all as she remembered him. The quick, clever mouth was the same. The dark hair was the same. The eyes were warmer than she had recalled, and the smile he offered her was the same smile he had offered her 3 summers ago, and it landed on her now in a way it hadn't then, because she was not 21, and he was not a stranger at a punch table, and the corridor outside this room was full of guards. "Miss Vance, Mr. Cassel. Forgive my forwardness in calling. I shall not stay long. I wished only to assure myself that you were well, after a night that I imagine cannot have been an easy one. I am well, thank you. And the Duke, he was courteous?" "He was a perfect gentleman. Of course. Of course. Forgive me." He gestured toward the chair opposite his own. "Would you sit a moment? There is a thing I should like to say, and I should rather not say it, standing." She sat. He sat. He did not speak at once. He looked at his hands, and then at the snow beyond the window, and then at her, and the warmth in his face had gone slightly quieter, slightly more careful. "Miss Vance, I am going to ask you a question, and I should like you to know, before I do, that I ask it not from idle curiosity, but from concern. Are you, in fact, engaged to the Duke of Renmore?" "Mr. Cassel, I would not press the question if I had not reason. The household believes you are. The court believes you are. I would simply prefer to know whether what the household believes is true, or whether it is a courtesy that the Chamberlain's office has been good enough to arrange on your behalf." "And why does it concern you, Mr. Castle?" "Because if the latter, Miss Vance, and then you have been placed in an extraordinarily delicate position, and I should like you to know that you have a friend in this corridor who is in a position to assist you. I have the ear of persons it would surprise you to learn I have the ear of. I can carry messages to your uncle. I can secure a quiet departure for you, if you should prefer one. I can do, in short, a great many things that the Chamberlain's office cannot do for you, because the Chamberlain's office is the one that placed you here." He said it gently. He said it well. And as he said it, Marisol heard, faint beneath the gentleness, the small, precise rhythm of a man who had practiced. She did not move. "Mr. Cassel, may I ask you something in return? Anything. At the Lendrick midsummer 3 years ago, what color was the ribbon you said I wore at my wrist?" He smiled. The smile faltered for the smallest of fractions. He recovered very quickly. Green, was it not? It was yellow, Mr. Castle. The smile did not fall. It simply ceased to mean anything. You wrote to me last night, she said very softly, of a green ribbon and a laugh and 3 years of remembering. I had thought, when I read it, that I had perhaps misremembered the color myself. I had not. I wore yellow ribbons all that summer. I had a half-dozen of them. My cousin teased me about it for a year. There was no green ribbon, Mr. Castle, and I do not believe you remember me at all. I believe someone described me to you very recently, and described me imperfectly, and you have come this morning to discover whether I am the sort of woman who can be made grateful by being remembered. He did not answer for the space of perhaps 4 breaths. Miss Vance. Good morning, Mr. Cassell. She rose. He rose with her, more slowly. The warmth had left his face entirely now, and what remained was not unkind. It was simply professional, in a way she had not, when she was 21, known how to recognize. You are cleverer, he said quietly, than you have been described. I shall take that, Mr. Castle, as a small mercy. She walked out of the reception room, and the corridor seemed to her, for the first time since her arrival at court, very slightly less cold. She returned to her chamber and closed the door behind her, and stood for a long moment with her hand still on the wood. She did not call for Caspian. She was not yet ready to. She crossed to the fire instead, and she stood before it, and she discovered that her hands had begun to tremble again, but not with fear this time, and not with cold. With anger. A clean, dry anger she had not felt in years, an anger she suspected she had been saving for a great deal longer than she had realized. 3 years. 3 years she had carried in some quiet pocket of her memory the small private thought that one charming man, at one summer festival, had perhaps thought of her once. Not often. Not seriously. Just once in the carriage home. It had been a little warm thing she had not known she was holding until this morning, when a man with that same charm had taken it out of her hand and used the wrong color, and the warm thing had revealed itself for what it was. She had built 4 years of small inadequacies on the strength of men like Adrian Cassell forgetting her, and now that one had bothered to pretend to remember, she had discovered that she had wanted the pretense more than she had wanted the truth. She did not like learning that about herself. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She had not realized she was crying. She crossed to the connecting door and turned the key. Caspian was at the writing desk. He did not look up at once. He was finishing a sentence on a sheet of paper. He set the pen down. He looked. Miss Vance, you were right. He did not speak. He did not remember me. He had been told. He had the ribbon wrong. Her voice held. I do not know why I am telling you this. I do not require comfort. I am not. I am not asking you to gloat. Only I shall be very grateful, Your Grace, if you do not. He rose. He crossed the room slowly. He stopped a careful distance from her, the distance of a man who knew that the wrong inch could cost him a great deal. I take, he said, no pleasure in being right. You said that yesterday. I meant it then. I mean it more this morning. He offered to remove me from court. He said he could. He said he had the ear of persons. He said it gently. He wanted something from me, and I do not yet know what. And that is the part that frightens me, Your Grace, because if a man as practiced as that has been sent for me, then someone has decided I am worth practicing on, and I do not know why. Miss Vance, he was watching her face. May I ask what you said to him? I asked him the color of the ribbon. His eyes closed briefly. Something in his face moved. And he answered wrongly. Green. And you? I told him good morning. He did not laugh. He did something quieter. He let out a breath he had clearly been holding for some time, and the rigidity in his shoulders that she had come to take for granted seemed, for the first time in 4 years of her acquaintance with him, to release. "Miss Vance." "Your Grace." "I have been afraid of you," he said, "for 4 years." She could not speak. "Not of you precisely. Of what you would see if I let you. That was the calculation I made the night your uncle introduced us. You laughed at something Estienne said, and you turned, and you had ink on your cuff, and you did not appear to mind. And I thought, this is a woman who shall see straight through me if I permit her near. And I have been a great many years in arranging not to be seen straight through, and I was not going to permit it for the sake of a laugh at a salon. So I bowed, and I left the room earlier than I had intended, and the next time I saw you, I was already practiced. I have been practiced ever since. Your Grace, forgive me. I have not slept. I am saying this badly. You're saying it. I should rather you said it badly than not." He looked at the fire. He did not look at her. "I was not raised to expect happiness, Miss Vance. My father did not believe in it. He believed in advantage, and in the long maintenance of a name, and in the careful avoidance of any attachment that might one day be turned into a weakness against the family. He died before he had finished training me. I have spent 5 years finishing the training myself. I have done it well. I am, by every standard that matters in my world, an excellent duke and an excellent son to a man who is no longer alive to require the excellence of me. And I have not been a happy man for 5 years, Miss Vance, and I had not, until last night, expected to be. Until last night. Until you stood in this room, and I told you I had been wrong about you for 4 years, and I did not feel as if I had lost something by saying it. I felt as if I had set something down. I had not realized it was heavy. I had carried it for so long. She did not move, and I cannot, Miss Vance, do anything about that. I am here in this corridor under the Chamberlain's eye on a charge I don't yet know, and I am to be married, in name, by tomorrow morning's decision, to a woman I have spent 4 years pretending I did not see, and whatever passes between us in this corridor cannot leave it, because if it leaves it, my family suffers, and yours, and there is a third name attached to mine in the negotiations of the past 6 months that I have not yet told you about, and shall not until I am released to. A third name. A betrothal already in discussion, not announced, not signed, but understood by my mother, by the family in question, and by half the older men of the Chancellery. The name does not matter at present. What matters is that I came to court yesterday already promised, in all but document, to a woman I do not love, and I shall leave court tomorrow either still promised, or having broken a promise that was not yet quite a promise, and either way the cost shall be paid by people other than me. Then why are you telling me this? His eyes lifted to hers at last, and they were not slate. They were not storm. They were something raw, an exhaustion that had finally, after years, found a person it was willing to admit itself to. Because you asked me yesterday why I had been kind to you, and I gave you a polite answer. And the polite answer was true, and also incomplete, and I find I cannot bear to leave it incomplete a second night. The complete answer, Miss Vance, is that I am afraid. I have been afraid since the moment I saw you in that antechamber. I am more afraid now than I was then. I do not know what the Chamberlain shall ask us tomorrow. I do not know what is in the letters he has gathered. I do not know whether the hand that placed you in this corridor placed you here to protect you or to use you. And I find that the only thing in the past 5 years that has been more frightening to me than any of that is the thought that if we walk out of this wing tomorrow with separate answers, you shall go back to your uncle's house, and I shall go back to mine. And I shall never have told you, in the one chance I was given to tell you, that I have been awake all night with the door between us locked, because I was not sure, I trusted myself, to be in a chamber with you, and a fire, and a closed door, when I was this tired and this near to honest. The silence that followed was the silence of a chamber in which two people had stopped breathing at the same moment. Caspian. It was the first time she had said his name. It came out very quietly. "Do not," he said. "Do not say anything yet. Please. I shall not sleep tonight either, and I should like to keep what you have not yet said for a little longer, in case it is something I cannot afford to have heard. Caspian." A bell began to ring in the depths of the court. 3 slow strokes, a pause, 3 more. Not the quarter. Not the hour. A summons. He went very still. "That is for us," he said. "The audience has been called." Footsteps were already approaching in the corridor outside. The latch of her door turned, and Wren stepped through, pale as the snow beyond the window. And behind Wren, in the doorway, stood Lady Whitbourne in her crimson sash. And her face was harder than Marisol had yet seen it, and the words she spoke fell into the chamber like a stone dropped from a great height. "Miss Vance, your grace, His Majesty shall see you now, and he is not alone, and I am sorry." The summons had not been for the audience after all. Lady Whitbourne escorted them in silence down a narrow service corridor she had not used the night before, past a turning Marisol had not known existed, into a small windowless room paneled in dark wood and lit by a single oil lamp set upon a low round table. There were 3 chairs around the table, and one of them held a man Marisol did not at first recognize. He was thin, perhaps 60, with the close-cropped gray hair and pale, unmemorable face of a man whose business was to be unmemorable. He did not rise when they entered. He inclined his head, no more. "His Majesty," Lady Whitbourne said quietly, "is engaged with the council. He shall not see you for some hours yet. In the meantime, he wishes you to speak with Master Holbrook. Master Holbrook is the keeper of the Chancellery's private correspondence. He has read what we have. He shall ask you, separately, what you can each tell him of it. He shall not record your answers. The conversation does not exist." She left them. The door closed behind her with the same hidden click as the panel in the antechamber. Master Holbrook gestured to one of the empty chairs. "Miss Vance, I shall begin with you, if you will permit it. His Grace shall wait in the small library next door. The walls are thin. He shall not hear us, but he shall be near. I am not in the business of separating people unnecessarily." She did not look at Caspian. She could not. If she had, she did not trust what would have shown in her face. "I shall wait, Miss Vance," Caspian said. His voice was level. He gave no sign of the man who, half an hour earlier, had asked her not to answer him yet. He went. The door closed. She sat. Master Holbrook produced a single folded sheet of paper from inside his coat. He laid it on the table between them. He did not unfold it. "Miss Vance, I shall be brief, because your time and mine are both shorter than they appear. Some weeks ago, a packet of letters was intercepted en route to a private address in the western counties. The packet contained correspondence from 3 persons of standing within His Majesty's household, written across a period of perhaps 2 years. The letters discuss matters that, were they to be made public, would embarrass the household, and, in one instance, jeopardize a treaty negotiation that has not yet been concluded. The letters were not stolen by an enemy of the crown. They were stolen by a servant in the pay of someone who has not yet declared himself, and who I believe is here at court tonight. She did not move. Your name, Miss Vance, appears in one of the letters. Not as a participant in the correspondence, as a subject. A single sentence, written by the Duke of Renmore to a friend at the embassy at Verlaine, dated the autumn of last year. I shall read it to you, if you can bear it. Read it. He unfolded the paper. His voice when he read was as flat as if he were reading a bill of lading. I attended the Vance household for the harvest dinner this past month. Estienne as well. His niece was present. She is, I find, the only person in that house I cannot dismiss from my mind on the carriage ride home, and I shall therefore take pains not to attend the harvest dinner next year. He refolded the paper. That is the entire reference, Miss Vance. There is no other. Your name is mentioned in no other letter in the packet. You are, in the Chancellery's view, an entirely innocent party. The difficulty is that the person who arranged the theft of these letters does not yet know you are innocent, and has, we believe, instructed at least one of his agents to discover, by whatever means, what you and the Duke have to do with one another. That agent paid you a visit last night, and again this morning. Adrien Cassel. Mr. Cassel is paid by the Chancellery on Tuesdays, and by another gentleman on Fridays. We have known this for some time. We have not yet found it worth the inconvenience of dismissing him. Last night, however, he was instructed to determine whether your engagement to His Grace was real. If real, his employer shall move on to other matters. If not, his employer shall make use of you, Miss Vance, in ways I shall not detail in this room. We had hoped you would be sufficiently afraid of last night's ruse to play the part of betrothed convincingly until the audience. We had not expected you to dispatch Mr. Cassel before breakfast with a question about ribbons. I confess I find myself impressed. You knew. You knew before you sent him to me. I knew, Miss Vance, that he would be sent. I did not send him. I do not control the gentleman who employs him on Fridays. I control only the arrangements of this corridor, and I have done what I could. She stared at the folded paper on the table. His Grace wrote that sentence. He did, in the autumn, to a friend at Verlaine, to a man who we now believe was the original mark of the theft. The letters were not stolen for what the Duke wrote about you. They were stolen for what other persons wrote about other matters. Your sentence is a footnote. We do not believe the gentleman behind the theft has read it carefully. We believe he saw the Duke's name and your name in proximity, and decided the proximity might be useful, and the rest is the corridor you woke in this morning. Does His Grace know? He does. He has known since the letter of warning he received 2 weeks ago. He did not tell you, because he was instructed not to, until the Chancellery had verified that the sentence in question was the only mention of you. We verified it 3 days ago. He requested that he be permitted to inform you himself before the audience. The Chamberlain refused. I am informing you now, Miss Vance, on my own authority, because I find I prefer my witnesses to know what they are witnesses to. She looked at the paper a long time. Is that all, Master Holbrook? That is all I am at liberty to tell you. I must now ask you 4 questions, and I require honest answers. Have you knowingly received any correspondence from anyone connected to the Verlaine embassy in the past 2 years? No. Have you knowingly passed any correspondence on behalf of any person to any other person in the same period? No. Are you aware of any reason any person at this court might have to wish you harm? Until last night, no. Today, I no longer trust my own answer. Understood. Last question. Did you, before being placed in this corridor last night, have any private understanding of any kind with His Grace the Duke of Renmore? No, Master Holbrook. I had not exchanged 20 private words with him in 4 years. The understanding I have of him today was begun last night, in a chamber I would not have entered had I been given a choice, and it is not yet a thing I have a name for. He inclined his head. He did not write. He had not lifted a pen. Thank you, Miss Vance. Please send His Grace in. You may return to your chamber. Wren shall escort you. She rose. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on it. Master Holbrook. Miss Vance. That sentence that he wrote. He did not know I would ever read it. No, Miss Vance, he did not. She opened the door. Caspian was at the long window of the small library, his back to her. He turned at the sound of the door. His eyes searched her face. Master Holbrook would speak with you. Marisol. He told me about the letter. He went still. He read me the sentence. Marisol. Go. He's waiting. She walked past him into the corridor. Wren was there, pale and silent. She did not speak to Wren. She walked back to her chamber, and she closed the door behind her, and she crossed to the connecting door and turned the key, and she sat on the edge of the bed in the deep blue wool gown that someone she did not know had bought for her, and she thought of a man who had spent 4 years dismissing her at every dinner at her uncle's house because he had decided, on a single autumn night, that he could not stop thinking of her on the ride home. She put her face in her hands, and she did not cry. She breathed, slowly, the way she had taught herself to breathe in the antechamber when Lady Whitbourne had told her she was to be lodged adjoining a duke. When she lowered her hands, she found she was no longer afraid. She was something quieter and harder and older than she had been at breakfast. The connecting door rattled, very softly. Once. Then again. He had come back. He was on the other side. He had not knocked at the corridor door. He had come the short way. She rose. She crossed to the door. She set her palm flat against the wood. Caspian. Marisol. I am turning the key. You do not have to. I am turning it because I want to, not because I am told to, not because I am afraid, because the only thing in this corridor that has been mine since I arrived is this key, and I am choosing what it does. She turned it. The door opened. He stood in the gap. He did not step through. May I come in? Yes. He came in. He did not touch her. He stood 3 feet from her in the firelight, and his face was the face of a man who had not slept in 2 nights and had been read his own private sentence back to him by a woman he had not yet earned the right to be read it by. I should have told you. You were instructed not to. I should have told you anyway. Yes, Marisol. I want you to understand something. Her voice was steady. I'm not angry that you wrote it. I'm not angry that you did not tell me. I'm angry that for 4 years I have walked into rooms where you were and assumed that the chill in your voice was the measure of how little I mattered. I'm angry that I trained myself to flinch at the sight of you. I'm angry that the truth was the opposite of the lesson, and that the lesson cost me 4 years of disliking myself in your presence. I'm not angry at you, Caspian. I'm angry at the years. He closed his eyes. I cannot give them back. I know. I can give you the next ones. I know that too. She did not move, and he did not move. The fire made a small, soft, collapsing sound. Somewhere 2 corridors away, a clock began to strike noon, and the strokes were slow and full and did not feel like time passing. They felt like time stopping. Caspian. Yes. I have not yet given you the answer you asked me not to give. Marisol, you do not have to give it now. The audience is in 2 hours. We do not know what is coming. I do not want you to give me anything you might wish later that you had kept. I am giving it now, because I might not be able to later, and I should rather you have it now and lose it later than not have it at all. She crossed the 3 feet between them. She did not throw herself at him. She did not weep against his coat. She put both her hands flat against the front of his waistcoat, where she could feel his heart going much too fast for a man who looked so still. And she lifted her face, and she looked at him steadily, and she said the thing she had not yet known she was going to say. Stand beside me this afternoon. Whatever is said, whatever is asked, whatever they decide. Stand beside me. That is the answer, Caspian. That is all of it. I do not require you to break promises tonight. I do not require you to dismantle your house tomorrow. I require you to stand beside me when His Majesty asks his questions, and to let the rest of it be what it is. If you can do that, then everything else is a thing we shall solve afterward, together, slowly, and not under this roof. His arms came around her, slowly, as if he were not entirely sure he was permitted. Marisol, yes, I shall stand beside you. Say it again. I shall stand beside you, in the audience chamber, in every corridor of this court, in every room I am ever in for the rest of my life, if you shall permit it. I shall stand beside you. She let out a breath she had been holding since the antechamber. He bent his forehead to hers. He did not kiss her. He held her, the way a man holds something he has been afraid for a long time of breaking. And she held him back, and the fire made its small, soft, collapsing sounds. And outside the leaded window, the snow began again to fall, slow and thick and absolutely silent. A bell tolled the half-hour, then another. Neither of them moved. When the next knock came at the corridor door, it was loud, and it was sharp, and it was not a knock she had heard before, and Caspian went very still against her, and she felt the change in him before she heard the voice through the wood, a voice she did not yet know, speaking the one sentence neither of them had been ready for. Your Grace, Miss Vance, the audience has moved forward. His Majesty shall receive you in a quarter of an hour. Lady Whitbourne requires you in the long gallery at once. The voice was male, young and unpracticed. A page, not an officer. He delivered the words and went. Caspian stepped back. The space between them returned. 3 feet. The same 3 feet he had crossed, and she had crossed back. He did not look at her. Marisol. Yes. I cannot stand beside you in the audience chamber today. The chamber went very quiet. She had heard him say her name 3 times now in the past 10 minutes, and she had not, in any of them, heard the version of his voice he was using now. It was the voice of the antechamber. The voice of Slate. The voice of a man who had spent 5 years finishing his own training. What? I cannot. Caspian! Listen to me. He did not raise his voice. He raised the wall. She could see it going up between them faster than she could think to put a hand against the rising of it. If I stand beside you in front of His Majesty today, the audience becomes a different audience. It becomes the audience at which the Duke of Renmore publicly aligned his name with that of a young woman who is currently a subject of a stolen letter, the contents of which His Majesty has not yet read aloud. The Chancellery will lose the case it is preparing. The man behind the theft will see in real time exactly what his theft has cost him in leverage, and he will move at once to make use of what little he has left. And what little he has left, Marisol, includes you. You become his last available piece. Your name becomes the price of the rest of his retreat. I do not. Listen to me. If I stand beside you in there as anything other than a polite stranger, I cost you the protection of the Chancellery's position. I cost the Chancellery the case. I cost you, by tomorrow's gossip, the reputation that Lady Whitbourne and Master Holbrook have spent a night and a morning preserving. I shall do, Marisol, in a single gesture, what every man you have met since you walked into this corridor has been working to prevent. You said. I know what I said. I said it 10 minutes ago. I meant it. I mean it still. I shall stand beside you. I shall not stand beside you in the next quarter of an hour. The two are not the same sentence. Caspian, do not. Caspian, you are doing the thing. You said you were afraid of doing the thing. You are doing it." He looked at her then. She had not expected him to. "Yes," he said, "I am." "Then do not." "Marisol, I have to. For 1 hour, for the duration of the audience. I shall walk in beside you as a stranger. I shall give my answers. I shall give them as flatly as I have ever spoken in my life. I shall let the household believe what it has believed since last night, and I shall let His Majesty conclude what he is going to conclude. And when it is over, I shall come and find you, and we shall have the rest of every conversation we have not yet had. But for 1 hour, Marisol, 1 hour, I have to be the man I was before yesterday, or you pay for it. And if I do not want you to be, it is not your choice. Forgive me, it is not your choice. It is the one choice in this corridor that has been mine since I walked into it, and I am making it. And I am making it because the only person in this corridor I am no longer willing to sacrifice is you. She did not weep. She had not wept yet, and she did not intend to begin in a quarter of an hour before an audience with the king. She felt her face go cold and still. Then go, Your Grace. Marisol, go to the long gallery. I shall follow. I shall wear the gown someone bought for me. I shall give my answers. I shall not look at you. I shall not stand beside you. I shall do the audience the way you have asked me to do it, because you have asked me, and because the part of me that you walked into this morning is willing to do you the courtesy you are not, today, willing to do me. Go. Marisol. Go. He went. The audience itself was not what she had imagined. The chamber was smaller than she had pictured. There were no thrones. His Majesty was a tired-looking man of 50, in a coat very like Caspian's, seated behind a long, polished table, with 2 clerks at his elbow, and the Lord Chamberlain at his right hand, and Lady Whitbourne at his left, and Master Holbrook standing inconspicuously by the door. There were no other observers. The court was not present. The court would be told afterward only what the Chancellery wished it to be told. His Majesty asked her 4 questions. They were the same 4 Master Holbrook had asked. She gave the same answers. Caspian, 2 paces to her right, didn't look at her, and answered his own questions in a voice she did not recognize. His Majesty thanked them both with the mild, distracted courtesy of a man whose afternoon contained 6 matters more pressing than this one, and dismissed them, and the audience was over in less than 20 minutes. In the corridor outside, Lady Whitbourne stopped her. "Miss Vance, you may return to your uncle's house this evening. The Chancellery will see to the gossip. The engagement to His Grace will be quietly understood by those few who heard of it to have been a misunderstanding of the households, regretted and dissolved. Your name shall not be spoken in connection with the letters. Mr. Castle shall trouble you no further. You have been, in the Chancellery's view, an exemplary witness. We are in your debt. And His Grace. His Grace shall remain at court for some days. There are matters of family business to which he must attend." A pause. "He sends his regards." Marisol did not turn her head. "Thank you, Lady Whitbourne." She left court within the hour. The carriage that bore her home was warm. Wren had packed her belongings. Her uncle's housekeeper greeted her at her uncle's door with a tray of tea and asked no questions, and Marisol drank the tea and went up the stairs to her own bedroom and shut the door and lay down on top of the bedclothes, still wearing the deep blue wool gown that someone she did not know had bought for her, and she stared at the ceiling, and she discovered that the small, private, warm thing she had carried for 3 years for Adrian Cassel had been replaced in less than a single day by a much larger and much colder thing she had no pocket to carry, and no name for, and no plan. He sends his regards. She lay there a long time. Her uncle returned from the northern estates 4 days later. He was not a demonstrative man. He read the letter the Chancellery had sent him without comment, set it down, looked at her across the breakfast table for a long moment, and said only, "Marisol, are you well?" "Yes, uncle." "Are you telling me the truth?" "No, uncle." He nodded, once, and did not press. He poured himself more coffee. He said after a silence, "If you should wish to go to your aunt at Caldhaven for some weeks, I shall write to her this afternoon. The household here can manage without you. The country air at this season is said to be improving. Thank you, uncle. I shall think on it." She did not go to Caldhaven. She did not, in fact, go anywhere. She rose each morning, and dressed, and ate, and answered her uncle's correspondence, and walked in the small enclosed garden behind the house, and went to bed each night, and slept poorly, and rose, and did it again. Her uncle watched her without seeming to watch her. The household watched her with rather less subtlety. No one asked her questions. The small, careful kindnesses of servants, who know something has happened, began to appear, unrequested, all around her. A second cushion in the chair by the morning-room window. A pot of the chocolate she had liked as a child, brought without her asking. A vase of forced narcissus on her writing desk, where there had not been one the day before. She did not weep. She did not break. She also did not write. On the 7th day, a letter came. It was not from Caspian. The seal was unfamiliar. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The contents took her a moment to place. "Miss Vance," the letter began, "You will not remember me, I think, although we have met. My name is Helene Marbury. I am the eldest daughter of Lord Marbury of Severnvale. I write to you on a matter that I would not ordinarily address to a woman I do not know, and I beg your patience with the irregularity. It has come to my attention that your name has, in the past week, been mentioned in a context that involves my own. I have been, for some months past, in negotiations through my father with the family of His Grace, the Duke of Renmore. Those negotiations were not yet announced. They have, this morning, been quietly withdrawn at His Grace's request. He has written to my father, and to me, and his letter to me was a letter I shall remember with admiration for the rest of my life. And I should like you to know that you have, in withdrawing him from that arrangement, done me a kindness greater than you can know. I had not wished to marry him. I had not known how to say so. I write this letter, Miss Vance, not to congratulate you, although I do, but to thank you. Sincerely yours, Helene Marbury." Marisol read it 3 times. She set it down. She did not know whether to laugh or to cry. She did neither. She walked to her writing desk and sat and took out a fresh sheet of paper, and she dipped her pen, and she found that her hand was perfectly steady, and she wrote, "Lady Marbury, you are kind to write. I am glad for you. You owe me no debt. The withdrawal of which you write was the act of a man who is, I believe, finally at the beginning of being honest, and the only debt incurred is the one he owes himself. I wish you every joy of your unencumbered future. Yours sincerely, Marisol Vance." She sealed it. She rang the bell. She gave it to the footman and told him it should go that day. She returned to her chair by the window, and she sat there a long time, and she discovered, for the first time in 7 days, that she could breathe all the way down to the bottom of her lungs. 2 days later, a second letter came. This one was from Caspian. She did not open it at once. She held it in her lap for an hour, in the chair by the window, watching the garden where the last of the early snow was melting in patches under a thin afternoon sun. Then she broke the seal. "Marisol." It was very short. "I have done 2 things this week. The first I shall not write, because if I write it, it shall be a thing I have written, and I should rather come and tell you. The second I shall write. I have ended the arrangement with the Marbury family. I did so the morning after the audience. It cost less than I had told myself for 5 years it would. The cost shall fall, and is already falling, where it ought, on me. I tell you this not to ask you for anything. You owe me nothing. I tell you because you said in a chamber, I shall not forget, that you required me to stand beside you in the audience, and to let the rest be a thing we solved together afterward. And I didn't stand beside you in the audience. And I have spent a week trying to find a way of standing beside you afterward that does not first require me to ask you to permit me to. I have given up. I am asking. May I call? See. She read it twice. She folded it. She did not weep. She had stopped weeping on the third day, and she did not intend to start again now. She wrote her answer in 2 lines and gave it to the same footman. Caspian. Yes. Tomorrow at 3. M. He came at 3. Her uncle was in his study and stayed there. Helene Marbury had written a second letter, this one to Marisol's uncle, and Marisol did not know what it had said, but her uncle had read it with no expression, and afterwards had said only, I shall be in my study at 3 tomorrow, and I shall not come out. Caspian was shown into the small morning room. She rose when he entered. He stopped a careful distance from her, the same distance he had stopped at the first time he had come through the connecting door in the fire-lit chamber, and he did not move closer until she did. Marisol. Caspian. He did not sit. He did not ask her to sit. He stood in the middle of the rug in her uncle's morning room, and he looked at her, and after a long moment he said, very quietly, Forgive me. For the audience. For the audience. I do. Marisol. I do, Caspian. I forgave you the night of the audience. I did not know I had until Helene Marbury's letter arrived. The forgiveness was waiting for the proof, and the proof came, and I was already where I needed to be when it did. There is nothing to forgive that is not already forgiven. He closed his eyes. I cannot. Sit down, Caspian. You look as if you have not slept. He sat. She sat. There was a low table between them, and a tray of the chocolate the housekeeper had begun bringing without being asked, and Caspian looked at the chocolate and looked at her and almost smiled. There is a thing, he said. The thing in the letter I would not write. May I tell you? Yes. It is not a small thing. Tell me. My mother has been informed of the withdrawal of the Marbury arrangement. She is, you understand, the only living person whose opinion on such matters is binding upon me, my father being dead, and my elder uncles having always declined to interfere. She wrote to me 3 days ago. I expected the letter to be furious. It was not. It was. It asked me a single question. She asked me whether I had, at any point in the past 5 years, intended to be happy. I had not been able to answer her. I rode to Severnvale yesterday and gave her the answer in person. She gave me her blessing this morning. She gave it Marisol on the condition that I bring you to her at the earliest possible occasion, because she informs me that she is 62 years of age and unwilling to wait to meet the woman who has taught her son in 1 week what she had failed to teach him in 32 years. The chocolate was getting cold in its pot. Neither of them was drinking it. Caspian. I am asking, Marisol. I am asking properly. May I court you? Openly. With your uncle's leave. With my mother's blessing. With every chaperone and calling hour and ridiculous ritual the world requires. I shall do it slowly. I shall do it for as long as you require. There is no hurry. I have nowhere else I wish to be. And the court. The court shall talk. And the chancellery. The chancellery will be told what I tell it. The matter of the letters is, by now, in another corridor entirely. We are no longer, you and I, anyone's witnesses. We are private persons. We may, if we choose, do private things. And the man behind the theft. His face changed. That, he said, is the part of this morning that I had not yet come to. He drew a sheet of paper from inside his coat. He laid it on the low table between them. He did not unfold it. His name was given to the chancellery yesterday by Adrian Cassell. Mr. Cassell found, for reasons that surprised everyone, including Mr. Cassell, that he wished, after his Friday encounter with you, to be employed only on Tuesdays. He came to Master Holbrook on Monday evening and gave a great many names. The man behind the theft is in custody. He is a man, Marisol. You have met. He sat at your uncle's table 4 times last winter. He is the reason you were placed in that corridor in the first place. He had hoped, by means of the letters and the engagement, and Mr. Cassell, and a great many other small arranged things, to compromise me. You were, in his planning, the lever. He shall stand trial in a closed session of the council in 2 weeks' time. Your name shall not be mentioned. Master Holbrook gives me his word, and I give you mine. Who? Marisol. Who, Caspian? He told her. She sat very still for a long moment. Then she let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had just been handed back a piece of her own past and had recognized, in the recognition, exactly how blind she had been. He sat at my uncle's table 4 times. 4. He brought me a book once. He said I should find it improving. Marisol. It was a poor translation. Yes, you told me so. At a country house weekend, 4 years ago. I was reading it. You told me it was a poor translation. I have hated you for 4 years for that, Caspian. I have hated you because the man who recommended the book was charming, and you were not. And I had decided that charm was the measure. I know. I am very tired of measuring the wrong things. I know. She rose. She crossed to him. He rose to meet her. She took his hand, and she held it. And she did not let go. And after a long moment she said, Yes, Caspian. You may court me. Openly. With my uncle's leave. With your mother's blessing. With every ridiculous ritual the world requires. And then, when we have done all of that, I should like to be permitted to come and stand beside you, in the place of your choosing, in front of whomever you please. Because I have been thinking of the sentence I gave you in the corridor, and I have decided I should like to be the one who says it next. His hand closed on hers. Tell me when, he said. Soon, she said. The court reconvened for the winter session 3 weeks later, and Marisol returned to it on Caspian's arm. She had not wanted to come. She had said so plainly in her uncle's morning room on the evening Caspian had brought her the printed card with her name written in beside his on the list of those expected at the opening reception of the season. Her uncle had said nothing. Caspian had said only, You do not have to. The card was sent because I am the Duke of Renmore, and the Chancellery has not yet learned to leave me off its lists. I shall send our regrets within the hour, if you wish. She had looked at the card a long time. No, she had said. I shall come. If I don't come, Caspian, the next time I come shall be harder than this one, and I should rather get through the hard part with you beside me than wait for it to grow worse. He had said, Stand beside me then, very quietly, and she had said, I intend to, and they had not spoken of it again. She had not, however, expected the long gallery to fall silent when they entered. It did not fall silent at once. The fall of silence in a court reception is a layered thing, a withdrawal of one conversation, and then another, and then a third, the way a snowfall settles, beginning at the edges. By the time they had walked the length of the gallery to where Lady Whitbourne stood receiving guests beside the Lord Chamberlain, perhaps 3/4 of the room had ceased speaking. The remaining quarter, Marisol observed, were the people who had not yet seen them. She kept her hand in the crook of Caspian's arm. She did not tighten her grip. She did not lift her chin to meet the stares. She walked at her ordinary pace, and she looked at the people she passed, the way one looks at the carved figures along the cornice of a chapel ceiling, without challenge and without apology, as if she did not require their attention to be interested in their faces. Lady Whitbourne, when they reached her, did not bow. She did something Marisol had not seen her do before. She smiled. It was a small, precise smile, and brief, and gone almost as soon as it appeared. But it had been there. Your Grace, Miss Vance, the Chancellery is glad to see you. The Lord Chamberlain begs your pardon. He shall greet you within the hour. There is, you understand, a matter that has just concluded in the Council, and he is required there a moment longer. The matter, Caspian said. The matter is concluded, Your Grace. Sentence has been passed. The gentleman in question shall not trouble the court or any other court again. Thank you, Lady Whitbourne. You are welcome, Your Grace. Miss Vance, please, the room is yours. She stepped aside. The reception line behind her had stopped moving. Marisol felt Caspian's hand cover hers, where it rested on his arm. He did not press. He simply let his hand stay there, warm, steady, unhurried, the gesture of a man who had no intention of removing it for the rest of the evening, unless she required him to. They moved into the room. The first to approach them was the Dowager Lady Penreath, a small round woman of 70, who had attended Marisol's mother's funeral when Marisol was 8, and who had embraced her in the churchyard and told her that her mother had been the kindest woman in 3 counties. Lady Penreath approached now with the same brisk indifference to ceremony, took Marisol's free hand, and said, "Child, I am very pleased to see you here. His Grace, you have done well. Do not allow this room to forget that she walked into it tonight on your arm. They forget quickly. Make a habit of reminding them." "My lady," Caspian said, "I intend to." "Excellent. I shall now go and tell Lady Rothmere, who is the worst of them, that I have spoken to you both at length and found nothing to disapprove of. She shall be furious. It shall improve my evening considerably." She moved off. Marisol felt, for the first time since entering the gallery, the muscles in her shoulders unclench. The second to approach was a tall, narrow man she did not know, who introduced himself as Lord Avenel of the Eastern Council, expressed his pleasure at making Miss Vance's acquaintance, and conducted, for perhaps 4 minutes, a perfectly correct conversation about the weather and the prospects of the spring sittings. He bowed and withdrew. Caspian, when he was gone, said quietly, "Avenel disliked my father. He is here tonight on my account, because he disliked my father. I shall take it. Allies are allies." The third to approach was the difficulty. He was a man of perhaps Caspian's age, fair-haired, well-dressed, with the easy carriage of a man who had never in his life entered a room and not been welcome in it. Marisol did not know him. Caspian, beside her, went still. "Renmore," the man said. "You are looking remarkably composed for a man whose name has been on every tongue in this hall for the past hour. Talvern, you are looking remarkably present for a man who was not on the list of the invited. The Lord Chamberlain made an exception. I asked him to. I had hoped to see you, and I had hoped, more particularly, to be introduced to your companion." The fair-haired man turned to Marisol. He did not bow. He inclined his head slightly, the inclination of a man who considered her not quite the object of a beau, but rather more than the object of nothing. "Miss Vance, I have heard a great deal about you." "Lord Talvern, I believe," Marisol said. "You have heard of me. I have heard your name in this past quarter of an hour for the first time. His Grace named you when we entered. I had not, until just now, attached the name to a face. And do you find that the name and the face agree? I have not yet decided. He smiled. Wow. The smile was the smile of Adrian Cassell, refined by another 20 years of practice. Marisol felt Caspian's hand tighten very slightly upon hers. Renmore, Talvern said, without looking away from Marisol. I shall be brief, because I see I am not going to have very long. There is a small matter the Council has not yet been informed of. It concerns a certain correspondence. I had not intended to raise it tonight. I had, in fact, intended never to raise it, on the understanding that certain other matters would be allowed to settle quietly. The settlement, I find, has not been quite as quiet as I had hoped. Your withdrawal from the Marbury arrangement in particular has caused inconveniences I had not anticipated. I wonder, Renmore, whether we might step out into the small gallery and discuss the matter privately. A quarter of an hour. No more. I shall return Miss Vance to your arm at the end of it none the worse, and we shall part this evening with our understandings restored. The room around them had not fallen silent again. The room was busy speaking of other things, on the surface of it, but Marisol observed, with the new clarity of a woman who had spent 10 days at the Chancellery's edge, that not a single person within 10 paces of them was speaking of anything but the conversation they were pretending not to overhear. Caspian did not move. Lord Talvern, he said. His voice was the slate voice, the antechamber voice, but there was something underneath it now that Marisol had not heard there before. It was not coldness. It was the steadiness of a man who had finally stopped being cold. There is no correspondence we have to discuss. There is no settlement. There is no understanding between us, and there shall not be one. The gentleman you employed for the management of the letters is, as Lady Whitbourne advised me a quarter of an hour ago, sentenced. The Chancellery has, at present, no further questions for me. I cannot answer for whether it has further questions for you. I would suggest, Talvern, that you ascertain the answer to that question before you ask another woman in this gallery to step into a private corridor with you. The fair-haired man's smile did not falter. The skin around it did. That is unfortunate, Renmore. I find it the reverse. Miss Vance. Talvern turned. He was the practiced one, the older Cassell, and he did not waste motion. Forgive me. I had not meant to discomfort you. I had meant only to spare His Grace an embarrassment that I now see he is determined to embrace. I shall not press further. May I say only that I have been, at various points in the past several years, a guest at your uncle's table, and that I had hoped this evening to renew an acquaintance I had thought of as a kindness. I see I have miscalculated. I beg your pardon. I shall not trouble you again. He bowed. He moved to withdraw. Lord Talvern. He stopped. He turned. The room had now, in fact, gone quiet, and there was no longer any pretense. Marisol did not raise her voice. She did not need to. You sat at my uncle's table 4 times. You brought me a book. You called it improving. I read 3 chapters of it before I set it down, because I found, on the 3rd chapter, that the translator had misunderstood his original to a degree even I, with my charmingly naive opinions, could not overlook. I had thought for 4 years that the Duke who told me so was the man to dislike. I had thought, for 4 years, that the man who had given me the book was the man to think well of. I find tonight that I was mistaken in both. I shall not detain you. I should like only to be certain, before you withdraw, that you understand which mistake I shall be correcting. The fair-haired man did not answer. He bowed, the second bow shallower than the first, and he walked the length of the long gallery with the carriage of a man who had still never in his life entered a room and not been welcome in it. And when he reached the door, he did not look back, because he knew, as everyone in the room now knew, that there was nothing waiting behind him to be seen. The room did not begin to speak again at once. It began slowly, the way a forest begins to make sound again after a hawk has flown over it. The small voices first, the larger after. Caspian did not move. His hand was still over Marisol's on his arm. After a long moment he said, very quietly, so that only she could hear, "Marisol." "Yes." "I love you." "I know." "I've loved you since the country house weekend." "I know that too. I worked it out on the carriage ride to court tonight." "How?" "Because no one tells a woman a translation is poor on the strength of 3 sentences, unless he has been listening to her read for some time, without permitting himself to say so." His mouth moved. It was, almost, a smile. It was the closest she had seen him come to one in public. "Marisol." "Yes. Stand beside me." "I am standing beside you, Caspian." "I know. I am saying it because I should like to say it again, in this room, and have it heard." He said it the second time louder. Not loud. Loud enough. "Stand beside me." The room heard. The room, she observed, went on hearing for the rest of the evening. And the looks that had been directed at her on her entrance were no longer the looks she had walked in beneath. And Lady Whitbourne, when they passed her again on their way out, did not smile a second time. But she inclined her head. Fully. The inclination of a woman who had spent 40 years in this gallery, and who recognized, as well as anyone present, the precise moment at which a room had changed its mind. The wedding was held at the chapel at Renmore in early spring. It was not large. Caspian's mother had arrived a week before the ceremony, and had taken charge of the household, with a quiet competence that had, within 3 days, won over even the cook, who had been at Renmore for 30 years and was famously unwinnable. She was a small woman, with the same slate-gray eyes as her son, and rather more visible warmth than he had inherited. She had embraced Marisol at the front step without ceremony, held her by the shoulders at arm's length, looked at her for a long, careful moment, and said, "Yes, I see. Welcome home, my dear. He has been very stupid for a long while. We shall not hold it against him forever." Marisol's uncle had given her away. He had walked her down the short aisle of the chapel without comment until they reached the altar, and then he had paused and had taken her hand, and had said, very low, so that only she could hear, "Your mother would be glad. She liked him from the first time she met him. I had never told you. She said he had a kind mouth. I had thought she meant the elder brother. I was mistaken." She had not wept on the carriage ride to court 3 weeks earlier. She had not wept in the long gallery. She had not wept when Helene Marbury's letter had arrived, or when Caspian had come to the morning room, or when his mother had embraced her at the front step. She wept then, briefly, against her uncle's shoulder, and her uncle had said only, "There, child. There," and patted her hand, and given it to Caspian. Caspian had taken it. Lady Whitbourne attended. She wore green rather than her crimson sash. She sat very straight in her pew throughout the ceremony, and spoke to no one before or afterward, except to wish the bride and groom every joy in a single brief sentence at the door of the chapel, as they emerged into the spring light. Master Holbrook attended also. He stood at the back of the chapel and slipped out before the recessional, and Marisol did not see him to thank him until 2 months later, at a small reception at her uncle's house, when he appeared at the edge of the room with a glass of wine in his hand and inclined his head to her without speaking, and she had crossed the room to him and said, "Master Holbrook, you came to my wedding." And he had said, "I attend few, your grace. I attend only those at which I find I have against my own training, become fond of the principles. It is a weakness. I do not encourage it in myself." She had laughed. For the first time in his presence, he had not laughed back. He had inclined his head a second time, and had withdrawn, and she had not seen him again. Caspian's mother stayed at Renmore through the summer. The court, as Caspian had predicted, talked. The talk did not last. Lord Talvern's trial concluded in the second week of the summer session, and the verdict was severe enough that no one wished to be remembered as one of his more recent associates, and a number of the harder voices in the long gallery discovered that they had always been admirers of the new Duchess of Renmore and had only been waiting for an appropriate moment to say so. Marisol accepted the discoveries with the same cool grace with which she had accepted the stairs, and Caspian's mother observed, over breakfast in the second month, that her new daughter possessed the rarest gift in their world, which was a memory exactly long enough for kindness and exactly short enough for everything else. Helene Marbury married a barrister from the western counties in the autumn. She wrote to Marisol from her wedding journey to say that she had never been so happy in her life, and that her husband had read aloud to her every evening of their travels and had not yet recommended a single improving book, and that she counted Marisol, in the private accounts of her own gratitude, as the woman who had taught her by example that it was permitted to refuse to marry the wrong man. Marisol kept the letter. She kept all the letters from that year. She kept Adrienne Cassell's letter as well, with its wrong color of ribbon. She kept it not because she had forgiven Adrienne Cassell, who had, in the end, accepted a quiet posting to a distant embassy and was rumored to have improved there, but because it had been the first letter she had ever held in her hand and recognized, on the third reading, for what it was. It was the moment, she thought afterward, when she had begun to be able to recognize anything at all. Caspian rode out with her every fine afternoon of that first summer at Renmore. He had not, before her arrival, ridden much. He had explained, on the second afternoon, that he had not enjoyed riding alone. She had said, "Then it is fortunate that you are not required to do so any longer." And he had said, "It is, Marisol. It is very fortunate." And they had ridden on. In the autumn, on the day the first frost touched the kitchen garden, she found him at the long window of his study, looking out at the lane that wound down through the elms toward the gate. He had not heard her come in. She stopped in the doorway and watched him a moment. He turned. "Marisol, you looked, just then, as you looked the first night. At court. At the long window in the chamber. You stood that way, with your hands behind your back, and I thought you were looking at the snow. I think now you were looking at the lane. There was no lane. There was a lane somewhere, Caspian. You have always been looking at one." He came to her. He took her hand. "There is no lane any longer," he said. "Or rather, the lane is here, and you are at the end of it, and I am not looking. I have arrived." She kissed him. Not the quick kiss of greeting, the slow, careful kiss of a woman who had been thinking, on her walk through the house to find him, of the sentence he had spoken in the long gallery, the sentence the room had heard, the sentence she had repeated to herself 100 times since the spring. "Stand beside me," she said, against his mouth. "I am, Marisol. I know. Are you well?" "I am. Very well." "Tell me why you have come to find me at this hour," she told him. His face went through, in the space of perhaps 3 seconds, the entire history of every face he had ever shown her. The slate first, then the crack of the slate, the way a frozen lake cracks in spring, the long sound running across it before the surface gives. Then the thing beneath, which was not a face she had names for, and which she had known for some weeks, was coming. "Marisol." "Yes, you are. In the spring. You are certain. I am certain." "Marisol." "Yes. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything, Caspian. You have been saying it since the chamber. You said it in the long gallery. You said it the morning of the audience. And you said it the afternoon you came to my uncle's morning room. You have said it every day since. There is nothing left for you to say. There are only things for you to do, and you have time, and you shall do them. Marisol. Yes. Stand beside me. I am standing beside you, Caspian. Always. Always. 2 years later, in the long gallery at Renmore, the Duchess of Renmore stood at the tall window with her son on her hip, watching her husband cross the lawn with the Dowager Duchess on his arm. The boy was 18 months old. He had his father's slate-gray eyes and his mother's mouth, and a temper which both his parents claimed to have inherited from the other. He was, his grandmother said, the most reasonable child of the family in 3 generations, and she had every intention of spoiling him into the bargain. Marisol watched them come up the lawn. She watched Caspian's hand, the steady one, beneath his mother's at the elbow. She watched her mother-in-law laugh at something he had said. She watched the autumn light, the late October light, fall across the old stone of the gatehouse beyond them, and she thought, as she sometimes thought, of a chamber in the east wing of court 2 years before, and of a brass key on a marble mantel, and of a man who had stood 3 feet from her in firelight and told her he had been afraid of her for 4 years. The boy reached for the window. He liked the cold of the glass. She let him touch it. He laughed. Yes, she said to him. There he is. There is your father. He's coming. Caspian saw them at the window. He lifted his free hand and waved, and his mother waved with him, and the boy on Marisol's hip waved back with the absolute seriousness of a child of 18 months who has just understood that he is being addressed. When they reached the gallery, the Dowager Duchess took her grandson without ceremony, said she was kidnapping him for an hour, and went off down the corridor toward the nursery. Caspian and Marisol stood at the window. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. You were thinking of court, he said. How did you know? You wear a particular face when you think of court. It is the face you wore when you used to think of Adrien Cassel. You no longer wear it for him. No, I have replaced him with you. It is an upgrade. I shall take it. They stood a moment in silence. Caspian. Yes. Do you remember what you said to me in the chamber that first night? You said you had spent 4 years convincing yourself that I was tedious. You said you suspected you had been wrong, and that you had very little time in which to discover by how much. I remember. You had 2 days, from the chamber to the morning room. 2 days, Caspian. You discovered by how much in 2 days. I had 4 years. I had simply not been counting them. Tell me what you would have done if we had not been put in that corridor, if there had been no letters, no Talvern, no audience, if I had stayed at my uncle's and you had stayed at yours, and the engagement to Helene Marbury had been signed in February. Tell me what you would have done. He was quiet for a long time. I would have married her, he said. I would have been a good husband to her, in the limited way I had trained myself to be a good husband. I would have come to your uncle's harvest dinner once a year, and I would have left after the second course. I would have read your name in the births column of the Gazette in 3 years' time, and I would have set the paper down and gone for a walk. I would have died, Marisol, in perhaps 30 years, having never told a single person the sentence I wrote to my friend at Verlin. And the sentence would have been the most honest thing I had ever written, and it would have died with me, and you would never have known I had written it. And you would have told yourself, on your own deathbed, that the Duke who had been rude to you about a translation had done you a great kindness in being rude, because he had taught you not to expect anything from men with cold eyes. Caspian, I would have been a small man. I would have died a small man. I would have died believing that smallness was duty. You did not. I did not. Because we were put in that corridor. Was it the corridor, Caspian? Was it really the corridor? He looked at her. No, he said. It was you. I should have walked into the corridor with someone else, and I should have walked out of it the same man I walked in. It was you. It was you in the chamber turning the key on the connecting door because you wanted to, and not because you were told to. It was you asking the color of the ribbon. It was you in the long gallery telling Talvern which mistake you would be correcting. It was you, Marisol. The corridor was the room. You were the door. She did not answer. She did not need to. He kissed the side of her head. He held her against him. The afternoon light moved a hand's breadth along the gallery floor. Marisol. Yes. In the chamber. The first night, when I went through the connecting door and closed it behind me. Did you know then that you would turn the key when I came to it the next day? I did not know it that night, Caspian. I knew it the next morning, when Adrienne Cassel had the ribbon wrong and I was angry about it. I knew in that moment that I had been measuring the wrong things for 4 years, and that there was a man 2 corridors away who had told me so on the first occasion he ever spoke to me, and that I had hated him for it because I had not wanted to know. I knew then that I would turn the key. The turning was the easy part. And if I had not come to the door, you would have come, Caspian. You came in the chamber when there was no door. You came in the morning room. You came to court when you should have stayed at Renmore. You shall come every time for the rest of our lives. You are not a man who fails to come when called. You are a man who waits, sometimes longer than he should, for the calling. Marisol. Yes, stand beside me. I am standing beside you, Caspian. I have been standing beside you since the chamber. I shall be standing beside you when our son is grown and your mother is gone, and the gallery is full of strangers we do not know. I shall be standing beside you when you forget to ask me to. I am not going anywhere. The only choice I have ever made that mattered was the one I made the morning of the audience. And I made it before I knew I was making it. And I have made it again every day since. And I shall make it tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and the day after that. He bent his head to hers. They stood a long while at the window. In the corridor, somewhere distant, the Dowager Duchess was singing to her grandson, slightly off-key, the same lullaby she had sung to Caspian 40 years before. The boy was laughing. The afternoon was lengthening. Outside, a single rider had appeared at the end of the long lane and was making his unhurried way up toward the house. And Marisol, because she had spent 2 years training herself to recognize the particular happiness of an afternoon that contained no threat, did not stiffen at the sight of him. He was the post rider. He carried letters. The letters would be from friends. Thank you for staying with Marisol and Caspian until the very end. Their story did not begin with a storm or a stolen kiss. It began with a woman in a cold antechamber, a man who had been afraid to be seen, and a single key on a marble mantel that she chose, in her own time, to turn. They were not rescued by the corridor that locked them in. They rescued each other, slowly, the way real love rescues people, by standing beside one another when the room went quiet, by being honest when honesty cost them everything, by choosing each other again on every ordinary afternoon for the rest of their lives. If their story moved you, please subscribe and ring the bell. There are more stories waiting. More cold rooms, more brave women, more men who finally learn to say the words that have been waiting in them all along. Thank you for being here. You are why we tell these stories.